This is the tale of two men. Both were outfit members with the same last names. One violated the outfit code of silence, and the other took the code of silence to his grave. After the imprisonment of boss Sam Wings Carlisi and his death a year later, John No-Nose DeFranzo became boss. DeFranzo ran the outfit from 1996 until 2014. John DeFranzo started out as an enforcer for the IUPA crew in the 1950s. He got the nickname No-Nose because he sliced off part of his nose while jumping through a window during a 1949 clothing store burglary and a gunfight with cops on Michigan Avenue. In 1950, DeFranzo served 2 years in prison for burglary. He was a suspect in the unsolved 1952 murder of Charles Gross. Gross was a Republican committeeman. He is also suspected in over 24 major crimes and a couple of other murders. DeFranzo started his career as a thief. Him and his older brother Peter were members of the 3-Minute Gang. They were disciplined hijackers and burglars. They were made members of the outfit for decades. DeFranzo and his close friend Marco D'Amico came up from the same West Side crew and were considered in the early days the yin and yang crooks. Outfit boss Joey IUPA pushed DeFranzo up the outfit ladder. In 1996, John No-Nose DeFranzo had been made acting boss of an organization about ready to collapse on itself. DeFranzo was left with the least amount of rackets than any other boss in history. Sports betting, video poker machines, and believe it or not, marijuana and hard drugs was pretty much all that was left. In the 1990s, DeFranzo's brother Joseph and Marco D'Amico were linked to the largest indoor marijuana farm in the state of Illinois. The grow operations were in Inverness and Carroll Stream. They ran this racket for years and made a fortune. This could have never happened without John DeFranzo's blessing. He knew there was a lot of money in that green stuff. For over 20 years, John DeFranzo sat at the head and overseen the decline of the once powerful Chicago outfit. Tough Tony Calabrese was a burglar, bookmaker, armed robber, outfit enforcer, and alleged hitman. Tony came into the outfit at its most unstable point. Crews were being merged, and a power struggle created confusion within the Cicero crew. Tony was a big earner for years through bookmaking, loan sharking, and robberies. Tony was also the #1 suspect in the attempted murder of Rosemarie Ray. She was a mother of 3, and she was shot 7 times in broad daylight on July 16, 1997, outside Linden Oaks Hospital in Naperville. She barely survived the attack. Her husband, Randall Ray, was waiting for her in the lobby at the time of the shooting. He has long been the prime suspect in setting up the attempted murder of his wife. Rosemarie Ray, age 51, filed for divorce 6 months before she was shot. She survived after spending 3 months in Edward Hospital, where she was guarded around the clock and registered under an assumed name. She remained in a coma for 6 weeks and underwent 15 surgeries, and still has 3 bullets lodged in her body. Prior to the shooting, Ray and Calabrese were associated through another crime. In April of 2003, they were sentenced to 7 years in prison for trying to shake down a Florida businessman in early 1997. Calabrese beat the businessman with a baseball bat after he opened a warehouse in Florida next to the one Randall Ray owned. Naperville cops claim Randall Ray paid Calabrese $10,000 to do the hit. Rosemarie Ray hasn't been able to identify her shooter. It was said he was wearing a mask at the time. Naperville Police Detective Mike Cross shed some light on the findings of the investigation during a deposition. On August 2002, cops recovered a gun at the bottom of the Calsag Canal in Alsip. The .22 caliber gun found was the one used in the race shooting. Police said the gun was found just one block from the auto detailing business, Tony C's First Impressions, owned by Tony Calabrese. An informant involved in the Florida case tipped off cops that Tony was known to toss his weapons in the canal behind his business. A ballistic test done at the FBI's crime lab in Quantico, Virginia, confirmed this was the weapon used in the race shooting. And to this day, no one has ever been charged in the attempted murder of Rosemary Ray. Tony Calabrese took an even bigger step on the road to becoming a made guy. It has been reported Tony was given the nod by Johnny Apes Monteleone to get rid of Ronnie Jarrett, a lieutenant in the 26th Street crew. Jarrett was an outfit hitman, bookie, loan shark, bomber, hijacker, and former chauffeur to Chinatown crew boss Angelo the Hook LaPetria. After the death of Capo Angelo LaPetria in 1999, Ronnie Jarrett felt he was owed the top spot and wanted to fill Angelo's shoes, and this created a problem within the Chinatown crew. Johnny Apes Monteleone got the nod from acting boss John DeFranzo to dispatch a hitter to get rid of Jarrett for the Chinatown crew. There were many other reasons Ronnie Jarrett was whacked. In his bid to take over, he divided the crew, and over the years made a lot of enemies. It was reported he was hoarding gambling proceeds from the leadership, and that alone was enough to get rid of Ronnie Jarrett. According to outfit rat Robert Cooper, the contract went to Tony Calabrese. On December 23, 1999, Ronnie Jarrett was gunned down in the street in front of his Bridgeport home on 30th and Low. He was on his way to a funeral of a longtime friend and mob turncoat, Charles Guy Bills. Jarrett died from 5 gunshot wounds a month later, and he never ID'd the shooter. According to Cooper in 2001, Tony Calabrese got the call again. This time it was on enforcer Anthony the Hatch Charamonte. It was unclear if Tony knew he was walking into a war between James the Man Marcello, Anthony Little Tony Zizzo, and Anthony the Hatch Charamonte. They were considered to be the old guard. And the other side of the coin was Michael the Large Guy Sarno and Jimmy the Ice Pick Inandino. And the situation quickly turned into every man for himself. Michael Sarno and Jimmy Inandino were on the streets running the bookmaking, loan sharking, and video poker machine operation. There was big money being generated through these rackets. When Johnny Apes Monteleone died in 2001, James the Man Marcello was in prison, serving 13 years, with Anthony Zizzo. Zizzo got 8 years, and Anthony the Hatch Charamonte served 2 years in prison, and he was released in 1998. He was the first one of the 4 back on the streets. A year later, in 1999, Sarno was released from federal prison. But Jimmy Inandino was out the whole time, and he basically got the jump on Marcello and company. The war started months after Monteleone's death. The power grab by Sarno and Jimmy I pushed Marcello and Zizzo to dispatch Charamonte to lay claim to what they thought was rightfully theirs. Tony Calabrese was a newcomer to the outfit, and they picked Tony to be the new go-to killer because the enforcement arm of the outfit, the 26th Street crew, was out of commission. Angelo the Hook LaPetria died in 1999, a couple of years after being released from prison. And the outfit's top killers, Frank and Nick Calabrese, were sentenced to prison in 1997 on racketeering charges. They were both facing 9 and 6-year sentences. On Thanksgiving Day, November 22, 2001, the wheels were set in motion. According to Robert Cooper, he drove Tony Calabrese to the Brown's Chicken in Lyons at sunset and waited for Anthony the Hatch Chiaramonte to show up for a meeting with who is unknown. A short time later, he showed up, walked into the Brown's Chicken, and soon after walked back out into the parking lot. That's when Cooper stopped the van between Chiaramonte's car and the entrance to Brown's Chicken, cutting off his escape. Calabrese then jumped out, walked fast up to Chiaramonte, and fired 2 shots, one hitting his arm and the other his chest. As he turned to run back into the restaurant, Tony pumped 3 more shots into his head, and then jumped into the van and fled down 39th Street. And that was it for Chiaramonte. It has been stated this was the last outfit hit in Chicago, but it really wasn't, because on August 31st, 2006, the number 2 guy, Anthony Zizzo, disappeared. He was last seen outside a Melrose Park restaurant where his car was found. He is listed as a missing person. The FBI considers Sarno and Jimmy I 2 of the top suspects in the 2006 disappearance of outfit underboss Anthony Little Tony Zizzo. It all started coming apart for Tony Calabrese in 2001. He organized a robbery crew and started pulling off takeover robberies. One of the crew members, drug addict Eddie Frank, wore the wire that sunk Tony. A bad drug deal by Eddie Frank led to the feds wiring him up. He went to Tony's shop after getting out of jail. They knew he was looking for a way out at their expense. And Tony and Cooper strip searched and beat Eddie Frank looking for the wire. They knew he had a wire, but they couldn't find it. And the tape was rolling.
You know to keep your mouth shut. I mean, you understand what'll happen.
Tony, do I look like I want to be dead?
Tony's actions and words led the feds to target his number 2 guy, Bob Cooper. Cooper also got in trouble for drugs, and the feds had him dead to rights. So we rolled on Tony, and a dozen other crew members and robbery witnesses came forward, and along with the tapes, sunk Tony Calabrese. He was arrested in 2001, and in 2003, while sitting in the Metropolitan Correctional Center downtown awaiting trial, him and Randall Ray were both sentenced to 7 years for the baseball bat beating in Florida. And Tony was found guilty in 2008 of sticking up 3 businesses, a leather shop, a butcher shop, and a tattoo parlor. He was sentenced to 62 years in prison. Bob Cooper was sentenced to 22 years for his admitted participation in the Chiaramonte hit. But no murder charges were ever brought by the feds against Tony. Tony was given 62 years plus 7 years. But the 62 years was for the 3 strong-arm robberies. But it really wasn't about the robberies. It was about the outfit murders and the attempted murder of the mother of 3, Rosemary Ray. They tried to get Tony to roll on the shot caller or callers. They wanted Sarno and an Indino and Randall Ray. The bottom line was he was given 2 life sentences for his silence. He learned the hard way the feds had more time and money than him. The feds were aware of the similar pattern that emerged in the attempted murder of Rosemary Ray and the murders of Jarrett and Chiaramonte. Tony Calabrese lost everything: his money, business, family, and in 2013, his wife Barbara divorced him. He resigned to his fate and didn't use others as the key to the cell door. The feds punished him, and he served hard time at Leavenworth. Over his 17 years in the federal system, he took responsibility for his crimes and alleged crimes through his silence. He was paying his debt to society. In 2017, Tony Calabrese was diagnosed with incurable cancer and given 6 months to live. He was transferred to the hospital wing at Terre Haute Federal Prison in Indiana. His request for release to die at home with his family was denied by President Donald Trump, even after 17 years behind bars. Nicky Slim Calabrese was born November 3, 1942. He is the son of James and Sophie Calabrese. The Calabreses had 7 kids. Nick was the middle child, and Frank was the oldest. The family settled in the Patch, and the boys grew up near the intersection of Grand and Ogden Avenues. The Patch was a tough-ass neighborhood located on Chicago's near west side. As a boy, Calabrese and some of his brothers worked at a newsstand at the corner of Grand Avenue and State Street. In the late 1950s, Calabrese graduated from Steinmetz High School in Chicago. Nick Calabrese served in the United States Navy and was sent to Vietnam in 1965. His brother Frank joined the Army years earlier and immediately went AWOL and was given a dishonorable discharge. He then hit the streets and ramped up his criminal career. Nick Calabrese was also an ironworker on the John Hancock construction project. He was also a Teamster forklift driver at McCormick Place, and from 1977 until 1989, a Cook County security officer at the criminal courthouse in Maywood. In the late 1960s, Frank Calabrese was making large amounts of money through his loan sharking operation, and this was noticed by 26th Street crew capo Turk Torello and Angelo LaPetria. They made Frank an offer he couldn't refuse: come work for us, leaving Frank with no choice, so he partnered up with the Chinatown crew. In 1969, Nick approached his brother and wanted in on the family business, and the request was granted by his brother. The crew enforced the biggest and most lucrative loan sharking operation in the city and worked side by side with outfit bookies and murdered their way across the city and the suburbs for nearly 30 years. In 1970, the Calabrese brothers took a turn down a dark road when they became outfit killers, and the outfit's best-kept secret. They quickly became the go-to guys when killing was a must. The 26th Street Chinatown crew was the enforcement arm of the outfit. At the top was Capo Turk Torello, and Angelo LaPetria was the underboss. And the guys that did most of the killings in the 70s and 80s were Jimmy LaPetria, Nick Calabrese, Frank Calabrese, Ronnie Jarrett, Frank Saladino, Johnny Apes Monteleone, John Feccarata, and James DeForty. And there were others. The crew of killers worked together like a pack of tigers hunting on the Serengeti Plains. They stalked their victims and waited for the right moment to strike and kill their prey. In 1970, Nick Calabrese went with his brother on his first hit. Frank told Nick, "Come on, we gotta dig a hole." The hit was on Juice Loan associate Michael Hambone Albergo. Albergo, Frank Calabrese, and others were subpoenaed by the Illinois Crime Investigating Commission. Albergo made the mistake of saying he wasn't going down alone. And that was enough to get rid of Albergo. Ronnie Jarrett, Nick Calabrese, and Frank Calabrese carried out the hit. He was strangled, His throat was slashed and then buried on a construction site close to Comiskey Park. Their murder signature became known as the Calabrese necktie, and the Calabreses would tie many neckties over the next 3 decades. This was Nick's first involvement in murder, but not Frank's. In 1976, Paul Haggerty was targeted over a jewelry store burglary of an outfit-connected jewelry store. Frank Calabrese Sr., Nick Calabrese, Ronnie Jarrett, and Frank Saladino stalked and kidnapped Haggerty. He was taken to Jarrett's mother-in-law's garage in Bridgeport. They tied him up, and Frank Sr. left and returned a short time later with Capo Turk Torello and underboss Angelo LaPetria. They questioned Haggerty for a while and then left. On the way out, Turk Torello gave the nod, and then all 4 started beating him. Frank Calabrese pulled out a rope and finished the job and strangled him and slit his throat. They put the body in the trunk of a stolen car, and Ronnie Jarrett left the car on Ashland Avenue. In March of 1977, Ronnie Jarrett and Frank Calabrese killed Henry Cosentino. Cosentino had got into a beef with Frank Saladino. Cosentino then shot Saladino in the leg. Saladino was an outfit enforcer and an associate of Frank Calabrese. Frank asked permission from Angelo LaPetria to hit Cosentino. LaPetria gave the nod, and he was hog-tied and given a Calabrese necktie. His body was found in the trunk of a car at a city impound lot. On January 16, 1978, the crew killed another in Ronnie Jarrett's mother-in-law's garage. This time, John Mendel was the target. Mendel was lured to the garage by Ronnie Jarrett, and waiting in the dark were Frank Calabrese, Nick Calabrese, and Frank Goomba Saladino. They all beat him to death, and this time it was Nick that gave the Calabrese necktie. He was killed for robbing Accardo's home. Mendel was found in the trunk of a car on Campbell Street on the south side. The infamous garage on Low Street in Bridgeport was Ronnie Jarrett's mother-in-law's garage. It was the workshop and warehouse for the enforcement arm of the outfit, the 26th Street Crew. They stored blasting caps, dynamite, C4, guns, and cars that would be used for surveillance and murder. They made bombs and killed men at the garage on Low Street. On January 31st, 1978, Donald Reno and Vincent Moretti were beaten to death and murdered in Cicero by Nick Calabrese, Frank Calabrese, Tony Borsellino, Joe Ferriola, Butch Petroselli, Frank Saladino, Johnny Monteleone, Ronnie Jarrett, and Jimmy LaPetria manned the police scanner in the car. They were both found in the back seat of Reno's Cadillac in Stickney. On July 20th, 1980, William Dauber and Charlotte Dauber were murdered while driving home from the courthouse. Frank Calabrese Sr. acted as the lookout, Ronnie Jarrett drove the van, and Butch Petroselli and Jerry Scarpelli were in the back with rifles. Jarrett drove up alongside them, and they began firing at the car. Dauber, attempting to avoid the gunfire, crashed the car into an apple tree. The car went up in flames, and both were killed. The Daubers were killed because William Dauber was cooperating with the feds. On December 30th, 1980, hitman and Wild Bunch killer William Butch Petroselli was stabbed twice in the chest, his throat was slit, and his face was burned beyond recognition. His feet were bound with rope, and his mouth was duct taped. He was found in his car some time later. Angelo LaPetria ordered the hit, and Nick and Frank Calabrese carried it out. Petrocelli was killed after getting caught stealing money that was supposed to be given to Harry Ailman's wife. Harry the Hook Ailman was imprisoned at the time. On June 24th, 1981, the most difficult and complex hit took place. The hit was on Michael Cagoni. The bombing occurred on Interstate 294 and the Ogden Avenue ramp in Hinsdale. Michael Spilatro supplied the remotes that blew him and his 1979 Mercedes-Benz to pieces. Johnny Apes Monteleone, John Feccarata, James DeForty, Nick Calabrese, and Frank Calabrese stalked this man for months. They couldn't get close to him, so they decided to put a bomb under his seat and use a staged vehicle. And once he passed it, the bomb blew right on the ramp. Cagoni was killed because his trucking company was undercutting produce shipping prices from the West Coast. And he took a stand, refusing to be extorted anymore by the outfit bosses. In 1981, Nicholas DeAndre was murdered by 6 outfit heavyweights. He was beaten to death with a baseball bat and the butt of a rifle by Sam Wings Carlisi, Angelo the Hook LaPetria, James the Man Marcello, Nicky Slim Calabrese, John Big Stoop Feccarata, and Tony the Hatch Charamonte. DeAndre was hit because he was suspected in the attempted murder and unsanctioned hit of Capo Al Pilato on a golf course in Crete, Illinois. On July 20th, after 13 murders, Nick and Frank Calabrese became made members of the outfit in October of 1983. Jimmy LaPetria picked them up and drove them to a closed restaurant off Roosevelt and Wolf Road. The bosses were all in one room, and in the other room were guys from other crews waiting to be made. Al the Pizza Man Torabini led the men in one by one. In attendance were boss Joey Iupa, Sam Carlisi, Vincent Solano, John DeFranzo, Angelo LaPetria, and Albert Taco. It was a fitting place to make guys. The restaurant where the ceremony was held was across the street from 2 cemeteries, Queen of Heavens and Mount Carmel. And directly across the street from the restaurant, about 500 yards in a straight line, is the grave of Al Capone. These 2 cemeteries are the final resting place of past outfit bosses and their associates, and in some cases, their victims. It was set at this location to give the guys being made the feeling that the outfit bosses of the past were bearing witness to the ceremony. The guys waiting to be made that October day were Nicky Slim Calabrese, Frank the Breeze Calabrese, Jimmy the Man Marcello, Anthony Little Tony Zizzo, Johnny Pudge Matassa, all became made men that day. And it was said many other guys were made throughout the years at Catuno's. In June of 1986, Emil Vacci was murdered in Arizona. Vacci fingered Las Vegas outfit scammer George Vandermark. In the mid-1970s, Vandermark ripped off the outfit for $3 million in slot machine skim money. Emil Vacci worked in Las Vegas at the time of the skim and knew they were looking for Vandermark, and he told the outfit where he was. The bosses gave Tony Spilatro the order, and hitmen out of Las Vegas paid Vandermark a visit. They killed him and buried him in the desert. The feds reopened the investigation 10 years later and brought in Vacci, and that was all it took. The outfit was worried about what he would tell them. And immediately Nick was dispatched to Phoenix to do the hit. with the help of James DeForty and Paul the Indian Shiro. Nick shot him in the head, and they dumped his body in an irrigation canal. On June 14, 1986, Tony Spilatro and Michael Spilatro were murdered by Nick and 10 other high-ranking outfit members in Bensonville. Boss Joe Ferriola, Sam Carlisi, James Marcello, Nick Calabrese, James LaPetria, John Feccarata, John DeFranzo, Louis Aboli, Albert Taco, Rocky Infelice, and Louis Marino. After the brothers were murdered, they were taken to Enos, Indiana, and buried on a nature reserve, but were discovered by a farmer 8 days later. Someone would be held accountable for this rookie mistake. The brothers were killed for a long list of outfit violations spanning over a decade. By the late 1980s, the Calabrese crew expanded to include Frank Sr.'s sons, Frank Jr. and his younger brother Kurt. They helped with the family business, mainly the collecting end of the juice loan business. On September 14, 1986, the last hit was done by Nick and Frank Calabrese, and it was a hit on John Feccarata. The Feccarata hit was authorized by then acting capo Jimmy LaPetria. The hit was carried out by Frank and Nick Calabrese. It was this hit that literally sent the outfit over a cliff. In the 1990s, the Calabrese crew muscled in on Matt Russo's body shop. Russo was in deep financial debt to Frank Sr. and signed over the shop to Frank Sr. And later, Russo got in trouble with the feds over insurance scams involving stolen cars. He was in a lot of trouble and agreed to wear a wire, and he taped the Calabrese crew discussing their loan sharking business. In July of 1995, a grand jury indicted Frank Sr., Nick, Frank Jr., and his brother Kurt on racketeering charges. Along with the tapes, multiple victims testified and forced the Calabrese crew to cop a plea. In 1997, they were all sentenced to lengthy prison terms. On July 27, 1998, Frank Jr. wrote a letter to the FBI and said he wanted to cooperate because he wanted his father off the streets for good. The feds drove to Milan Prison in Michigan and interviewed Frank Jr. He told them bits and pieces about the outfit murder of John Feccarata, but that wasn't enough because it was secondhand information. The feds wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. So they wired Frank Jr. up on February 14, 1999, 70 years to the day of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. And little did the outfit know, a modern massacre of the outfit was taking place in a little meeting room in Milan Federal Prison. Frank Jr. went to work recording his father. On 8 separate occasions behind the walls of Milan, Jr. got him to admit his role in at least 7 murders. And Frank Sr. was very concerned about Nick rolling over, and 2 pieces of evidence left at the murder scene of John Feccarata, but he had no concern of the traitor right in front of his face. Frank Sr. should have never trusted the son that ripped him off of $500,000. And he was also a drug addict and a liar. In November of 1999, Frank Jr. was released from Milan Prison and continued to work with the feds, except this time to profile the next target, his Uncle Nick. And now they had the murder that would break Nick Calabrese. In January of 2000, the feds paid Nick a visit at Pekin Federal Prison. The feds first took a DNA swab from Nick and then x-rayed both his forearms. The bone damage was visible, and the DNA was a match. And that was it. Months later, Nick decided to cooperate. In September of 1986, Frank and Nick were ordered to get rid of hitman John Feccarata. He had to go for botching the Spilatro's burial and gambling when he was on outfit business in Vegas, and hiding juice loan proceeds from outfit bosses, and bringing his hairdresser girlfriend along on outfit business. Nick and Frank created a ruse, a fictitious hit, and told Feccarata we're going to bomb the office of a local dentist that owed them money. Nick Calabrese and John Feccarata drove in one car, and Frank Calabrese followed in another. When they got to the parking lot of the dentist's office, Nick turned and pulled a gun out of the bag that had the bomb. Feccarata seen the gun and immediately fought for the gun. As the pair struggled, Nick was shot in the arm. Feccarata jumped out and started running from the stolen Buick. He tried to make it inside a bingo hall, but Nick knew if he didn't get him, he would be dead. So Nick ran after him and shot him twice in the back of the head, in front of a handful of stunned witnesses. As Nick Calabrese put the gloves in his pocket, they fell out. And then he dumped the gun in a sewer and ran to Frank's car and made an escape. Back in the neighborhood, a doctor was brought in to treat Nick's gunshot wound. And that was it for Frank and Nick Calabrese. That was the last hit they did together. Would be the death nail to the remaining leadership of the outfit. At the end of 2001, Nick Calabrese just up and disappeared from Pekin Federal Prison, and so did his records. This alarmed his cell block neighbor, James Marcello. While at Pekin, his cellmate for a while was Harry the Hook Ailman. Many outfit guys were serving time in Pekin. That's why the feds moved Nick once he started cooperating. The long FBI proffer process was started, and Nick was interviewed by the feds for almost 2 years. And he laid out a 30-year roadmap of outfit murders. He told the feds about his participation and indirect knowledge of 36 murders, but only 18 of them would be charged in court, 14 of which Nick carried out. And the reason why? Nick was told some of the information from other outfit guys, and it was basically third-hand information. So the feds decided not to use the other 18 murders. In April of 2005, the FBI turned in the Family Secrets 43-page indictment against 14 defendants. The Family Secrets trial began in June of 2007, and on August 30th of 2007, the trial ended. All 5 defendants were found guilty. Frank Calabrese was sentenced to multiple life sentences, plus 25 years. James Marcello got life, Joey Lombardo got life, and Paul Shiro and cop Anthony Doyle were convicted of racketeering. Of the other 9 defendants, 6 pled guilty, and 2 died before the trial: Frank Saladino and Cook County Sheriff Michael Rickey. But Frank the German Schweiss was sick during the trial and died in 2008, a year after the trial ended. And Nick Calabrese, he killed 14 people and only got 12 years, which equals 10 months per murder. Frank Calabrese, Marcello, Lombardo, and Shiro were ordered to pay more than $24 million in fines and restitution to the families of their victims. And there were other startling omissions by Nick Calabrese. One was about the 1973 murder of boss Sam Giancana. He claimed Tony Accardo had been involved in the killing of Giancana, and that Angelo LaPetria got rid of the gun. The gun used had a silencer. The silencer was made by Frank Calabrese and Ronnie Jarrett. The 10-shot 22 caliber gun with the silencer was found near Thatcher and Washington Boulevard in August of 1975. Another mob murder Nick shed light on was who killed the killers that botched the Tokyo Joe Ken Ito hit. Jasper Campisi and John Gattuso were killed by James DeForty and Sam Carlisi. Nick Calabrese had a lot to say. He claimed over the years Frank Calabrese was ripping off the LaPetria brothers of loan sharking proceeds. In 2010, $730,000 in cash, loaded handguns, and 1,000 pieces of jewelry and diamonds were stashed in a secret compartment behind a family portrait in the basement of his Oak Brook home. The tale of the family secrets trial took out the remaining leadership, and imprisonment and old age finished off the rest. Boss Joey Dove Zaiupa died in 1997, 1 year after being released from prison. And underboss Jackie Cerrone died in 1996, 6 days after he was released from prison. Sam Wings Carlisi died in 1997. Angelo the Hook LaPetria died in 1997. Jimmy LaPetria died in 1993. And Johnny Apes Monteleone died in January of 2001. Feared hitman Frank Calabrese Sr. died in prison on Christmas Day, December 26th of 2012. And acting boss John No-Nos DeFranzo died in 2018, a free man. Joey the Clown Lombardo died on October 19th, 2019. And James the Man Marcello presently languishes in the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado. Over the decades, the outfit became its own worst enemy. They did as much to damage themselves as the feds did, and maybe more. They murdered their own at an alarming rate, diminishing their ranks. Murder was a key part of the outfit's rise to power. Fear of violent death is what allowed the bosses to keep a stranglehold on the membership and the city of Chicago for nearly a century. And over that century, historians claim there were 1,100 to 1,400 outfit murders since the 1920s. There has not been an outfit murder in Chicago since 2006, and this proves one thing: they learned from their mistakes. Nick Calabrese was released from prison in 2012, and he was in the Witness Protection Program. He had been behind bars since 1997. Nick Calabrese has been seen back in the Chicago area, visiting several of his local haunts and reuniting with some of his old friends from childhood for drinks at local area bars. And one must ask, where is the outfit? It's been reported as of 2018, the outfit's membership is estimated to be around 24 made members, with less than 80 associates. It is the leanest it has been in its history. The seventh family is gone, and 2 of the 6 street crews have been merged, leaving only 4 active street crews. Another question is, what's the outfit up to these days? Some say online gambling is the new racket for the outfit, and most made guys today own legitimate businesses. Most of the rackets were taken, leaving the outfit adrift in uncharted waters. The next boss to take the reins of the outfit was Salvatore Solly D. De Laurentiis. He ran the outfit from 2014 till 2019. The De Laurentiis upper structure included Salvatore Sammy Catadula, Albert Venna, and Marco D'Amico, but D'Amico died in 2020. De Laurentiis is now 80 years old and has went into semi-retirement. And Albert Venna, the head of the Grand Avenue crew, is said to be next in line, along with Cicero crew boss James Inandino. He is slotted to be the number 2 guy. And it looks as though the outfit's old way of doing business is over for now. And we'll have to wait for future outfit history to be written. The outfit rackets that financed and built up the outfit were taken away one at a time by state and federal governments. This all started with the takeover of horse racing in 1927. And in December of 1933, the federal government took back control of alcohol. Tobacco products started to be taxed in the late 1920s, and due to the taxation of these products, they became a source of revenue for the outfit, and in 1972, the ATF was formed to combat the outfit's involvement in tobacco and the booze industry. In 1974, policy gambling was taken away and turned into the Illinois State Lottery. In 1999, Governor George Ryan expanded casino gambling by eliminating the boats and shifted to land-based casinos. And the hits just kept coming for the outfit. In 2009, video gambling was legalized in Illinois through the Video Gambling Act, destroying the underground illegal video gaming industry here in Illinois. In 2014, state legislators rolled out the Illinois Medical Cannabis Patient Program, the MCPP. What followed was 55 weed dispensaries. They were set up across the state, and this started the ball rolling towards legalization. In January of 2020, Governor J.B. Pritzker signed legislation approving marijuana legalization. Illinois was the 11th state to legalize weed, and they used legislation rather than a public referendum. In 2021, the longest running and most lucrative outfit racket, sports betting, was taken away. The new Illinois sports betting outlets were placed in casinos, racetracks, and off-track betting parlors. Politicians and law enforcement claimed the reasons the rackets were taken away by government was to protect the public and to obliterate the outfit and their earning potential. But they failed to eliminate the rackets themselves. Instead, the political class expanded them massively through legalization, and many of the politicians over the decades invested in these rackets before they were legalized. For years, the politicians and law enforcement claimed that anyone involved in gambling, alcohol, or marijuana were criminals. But today, the language and position has changed. And that's because of the money lawmakers and their associates are making. The hypocrisy of the new mob speaks volumes. For decades, the political class in Illinois and in the federal government jailed individuals for gambling, alcohol, untaxed cigarettes, and marijuana. They locked criminals up in the Cook County Jail, Pontiac Prison, Stateville Prison, Joliet Prison, and many other jails across the state. People lost their homes, cars, and families for crimes they now say are no longer crimes. The politicians in power used local police, state police, federal agents from multiple three-lettered agencies to take some of these rackets from the outfit. The new mob is in control of a $5 to $6 billion a year money machine. The taxes on gambling, alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana are set high to screw over the public. One would have to be naive to think there is no death attributed to these legalization policies by the state. Alcohol alone is very destructive. DUI deaths, overdose deaths, drug and alcohol-related domestic violence, and murder have risen to epidemic levels in Chicago and parts of the state. And liquor sales have generated over $70 million in state tax revenue and $72 billion in nationwide tax revenue. Most people that use marijuana go in search of a greater high. And for decades, marijuana has been the gateway drug that can be directly linked to the path leading to overdose deaths. Now that marijuana is legal, less parents will hide it from the kids, resulting in more exposure for children to the gateway drug. Today they are growing weed that is 10 times more potent than before it was legal. They make it in every form: smokable, bakery products, candy edibles, and now vaping is all the rage. There are presently over 100 weed dispensaries in Illinois. The first year of marijuana legalization produced over $1 billion in sales, and in 2021, weed sales surpassed liquor sales here in Illinois. The problem is, Illinois is operating a weed industry that is in direct violation of federal law, and the medical aspect has never been put through trials or approved by the FDA. You go and commit a felony, and you'll find yourself behind bars. But not the criminal political class. They operate with impunity. The bottom line is the corporate structure stole a $1 billion weed industry from the public. And the cause and effect is, how will they make up the loss of this revenue? Because they still have to earn. And the money will have to be made up through other crimes. Today there are more than 7,000 locations and 40,000 video gaming machines operating outside casinos. Illinois has more machines than any other state in the country, including Nevada. There are 10 casinos presently operating in Illinois, and there are more coming. All these rackets in the hands of government have been expanded to destructive levels. Weed shops, video gambling machines, casinos, lottery machines, and liquor stores are everywhere you look. There is no way to hide from these in-your-face vices. Decade after decade, law enforcement officers lost their lives combating all these rackets throughout the century. The best example is DEA agent Kiki Camarena. He lost his life fighting Mexican cartels, running a $2 billion a year marijuana grow operation in the desert. And today, law enforcement is being used by the new mob to protect their operations. And the reason is simple: greed. The new mob now controls most of the vices on the books and mismanages the money everywhere you look. The state debt is over $300 billion. And still, with all this massive vice revenue, the state keeps falling deeper and deeper into debt. Why did Republican Bruce Rauner spend $70 million of his own money to become governor? One might say to move the medical marijuana agenda forward. And Democrat J.B. Pritzker spent $171 million of his own money in 2 elections to become governor. And immediately after being elected, he legalized marijuana. And this was done so their friends, family, and political associates could directly benefit by investing in the new marijuana industry created by these 2 bosses. The outfit made millions off these rackets for decades, and the state is now making billions annually and has expanded these rackets beyond even the outfit boss's wildest dreams. In the new Chicago mob, the new boss of bosses is the governor of Illinois. And the mayor of Chicago is the underboss. And the made members are split between the State House and the City Council. And all the vendors are their associate earners. In the future, history will prove the new mob's policy expansion of these rackets is the catalyst that helped destroy the moral fiber of society through their addictions. And the remaining questions are, what is the next vice on their agenda to be legalized? And did we trade one evil for an even greater one? And I believe we have. The most evil, destructive racket known to man is the drug racket. Presently in this country, we